Good evening, or good morning, or good day, wherever you are. I apologize for the yellow cast on this video. I always do my filming pretty late in the evening, and I like it dark, so there's no other light, and also I'm still trying to figure out my camera setup. But tonight we will be reading probably the first selection of Charles Baudelaire's Artificial Paradises, or his classic work on opium and wine. And the portion I'll be reading is Wine and Hashish. It has been a bit of a hot minute, so forgive me if I stumble on any words, mispronounce anything. YouTube comment sections being what they are, I fully expect to be corrected, but when you do so, please be gentle. Alright. On Wine and Hashish, compared as a means of augmenting the individuality. 1851. Number 1. Wine. A very famous man who was also a great fool, things that often seem to go hand in hand, as I will doubtlessly have the painful pleasure of proving more than once, dared to write, in a book on dining composed from the double viewpoint of diet and pleasure, the following in his entry on wine. Father Noah, as old stories tell us, invented wine. It is a drink made from the first fruit to the first grapevine. And then, after that, nothing at all. There is no more. You can skim the volume all you like, turn it over, read it forward and backward, from right to left and from left to right, and you will find nothing more about wine and the physiology of taste by the illustrious and much respected Read-Aloud. I can do French. Nothing more about wine and the physiology of taste than Father Noah and It is a Drink. I imagine that an inhabitant of the moon or some other remote planet, traveling to our world and weary from his journey, would seek to slake his thirst and fill his stomach. Having heard vague rumors of the delicious drinks that restore hope and courage to the people of this sphere, this traveler, that he might make an informed choice, consults the Bible of taste, the infamous, famous even, infallible Read-Aloud, and under the heading Wine find that precious information, Father Noah, and this drink is made. That is indeed very helpful, very enlightening. After reading this sentence, one could not help but have a correct and clear idea that of all wines, their unique characteristics, their disadvantages, and the powers that they hold over the stomach and the brain. Ah, dear friends, do not read Read-Aloud. Wow, my 3.5 years of French are really failing me right now. Ah, dear friends, do not read him. May God preserve those he loves from useless reading. This is the first maxim in a little book by Lavater. French. A philosopher who had more love for man than have all the magistrates of the modern and ancient worlds combined. No cakes have been named for Lavater, but the memory of that angelic man will live on among Christians long after the good bourgeois themselves have forgotten the brûlée sauvage, a sort of tasteless brioche which serves at best as an excuse for the vomitings of insanely pedantic maxims taken from the famous masterpiece. Drinkers doleful and merry, you who have sought in wine remembrance or forgetfulness, and, always unfulfilled in this purpose, no longer gaze at the sky save through a bottom of a bottle. Drinkers forsaken and misunderstood, if a new edition of this pseudo-masterpiece dares to insult the common sense of the modern man. Are you going to buy a copy and so exchange good for bad and kindness for indifference? I open this book by the divine Hoffman, and my gaze falls upon a curious recommendation. The conscientiousness The conscientious musician must drink champagne before composing a comic opera. He finds in his glass all of the bubbling joy for which the genre is known. Religious music must be accompanied by the Rhine or the Juicon wine, as from the depths of profound thought and inebriating bitterness is found therein. Before a march of glory there must be Burgundy, in which the music of patriotic passion burns. Here, surely, is something of higher worth and, aside from the ardent expressions of a dedicated drinker, I find in this work the impartiality that does a German the greatest honor. Hoffmann developed a unique psychological barometer which allowed him to observe the varying temperatures and atmospheric phenomena of his soul. Thus we find such divisions as these: vaguely ironic, mood tempered with indulgence, desire for solitude and feelings of deep self-contentment, musical joy, musical enthusiasm, musical tempest, sarcastic gaiety, which even I cannot tolerate, my profound desire to quit myself, excessive objectivity, fusion of my being with nature. Needless to say, the divisions of Hoffmann's moral barometer were established according to the sequence in which they were generated, as are those of an ordinary barometer. There appears to be an obvious bond between his psychic barometer and the explanation of wine's musical qualities. Hoffmann's finances were just beginning to improve at the moment that death came to claim him. Fortune smiled on him. That same was true with our great beloved Balzac, who saw the aurora borealis of his brightest hopes only as he neared his final hour. The directors of newspapers and reviews, clamoring for contributions from his pen, then sent him, to win his favor, cases of French wine along with their monetary dispatches. And pause for a moment. I'm aware of the glare with my glasses. I really should be wearing them more often. I'll figure it out. On Wine and Hashish, Section 2. What man has never known the profound joys of wine? Whoever has had a grief to appease, a memory to evoke, a sorrow to drown, a castle in Spain to build, all have at one time invoked the mysterious God who lies concealed in the fibers of the grapevine. How radiant are those wine-induced visions, brilliantly illuminated by the inner sun. How true and burning the second youth which man draws from wine. But how dangerous, too, are its fierce pleasures and debilitating enchantments. And so I ask the judges, legislators, and worldly men, all of you on whom good fortune smiles, to tell us truly, would you, in your soul and conscience, have the pitiless courage to condemn a man who drinks of genius? To be sure, wine is not always a terrible adversary sure of victory, sworn to show neither pity nor mercy. Wine is like man. You can never be sure of how much it should be esteemed or scorned or loved or hated, nor of how many sublime deeds or monstrous deceits of it is capable. Thus we should not view it more harshly than we view ourselves. Let us treat wine as our equal. It's a very healthy relationship to the sobriety, honestly. Ugh. Sometimes I imagine that I can hear the voice of wine. It speaks from its soul in low musical language that only the spirit can understand. Man, my dear friend, despite my glass prison bolted with cork, I wish to sing you a song of true fraternity, a song that is merry, full of light and hope. I am not ungrateful. I know that I owe you my life. I know the pain your labors cost you, with the bright sun beating down upon your shoulders. You have given me life, for which I will abundantly reward you. I will generously repay my debt, for I feel a great joy when I fall down the throat parched by toil. I would sooner dwell in the stomach of an honest man, a cheerful grave wherein I enthusiastically fulfill my destiny, than in these dreary, unfeeling cellars. I raise a mighty turbulence within the laborer's stomach, and from There mount up invisible ladders into the brain, where I execute my supreme dance. The wine continues. Can you hear the powerful refrains of ancient times, the songs of love and glory, resounding and echoing within me? I am the soul of your native land, half soldier and half gentleman. I am Sunday's hope. As work makes for a prosperous day, so wine makes for a joyful Sunday. Pay me proud tribute, with your shirt sleeves rolled back and your elbows leaning upon the family table, and you shall know true contentment. I will brighten the eye of your old wife, partner of your daily sorrows and of your brightest hopes. I will soften her gaze and restore the youthful glow to her eye. And your dear son, the pale little donkey, as saddled with worries as a dray horse, for him I will be the oil that anointed the limbs of wrestlers in ancient days. I will drop into your chest like a vegetal ambrosia. I will be the grain that regenerates the cruelly plowed furrow. Poetry will be born of our intimate union. A God we shall create together, and we shall soar heavenward like sunbeams, perfumes, butterflies, buds, and all winged things. Thus sings wine in its mysterious language. Woe to him whose egotistical heart is closed to his brother's misfortunes, having never heard this song. I suppose that if Jesus Christ were called before a tribunal today, a prosecutor would claim that recidivism had aggravated his case. But wine is a beneficial recidivist. It restores us daily and daily delivers new blessings. This doubtlessly explains the moralist, his animosity to it. When I say moralist, I mean the pseudo-moralist hypocrite. Baudelaire. How sassy. But there is much more. Let us now delve deeper. Let us observe one of those mysterious souls who earn his living, so to speak, on the refuse of large cities. Refuse. For such unusual labors do exist, and in great number. I have sometimes thought with horror that there were these labors that brought no joy, labors that brought no pleasure, worries without comfort, sorrows without recompense. There I was wrong. This man is responsible for gathering up the daily debris of the capital. All that the city has rejected, all that it has lost, shunned, disdained, broken, this man catalogues and stores. He sifts through the archives of debauch, the junkyards of scrap. He creates order, makes an intelligent choice, like a miser hoarding treasure. He gathers the refuse that has been spit out by the god of industry, to make it objects of delight or utility. By the somber red glow of street lamps battered by storm and night, this man climbs the long meandering streets that run past rows of neat houses along Sainte-Geneviève Hill. He is equipped with his willow basket and his staff. He proceeds, shaking his head and stumbling over the cobblestones, like the young poets who spend their days wandering in search of rhymes. He talks to himself, pouring out his soul to the cold night shadows. His monologue is splendid enough to shame even the most lyrical of tragedies. Forward, march, company, about face, present arms. Exactly like Napoleon agonizing at Saint Helena. His staff has become an iron scepter and his willow basket an imperial cloak. He congratulates his army. The battle is won, but the day has been difficult. He passes on horseback beneath triumphal arches. His heart is glad. He listens ecstatically to the cheers of admiring crowd. Soon he will draw up some mightier law than ever has man proclaimed. He solemnly swears to please his people. Never again shall misery and vice plague human hearts. And yet his back and thighs are scraped raw by the weight of his basket. He is tormented by the cares of life. He is exhausted by the unceasing toil of 40 years. Age lies heavily upon him, but wine, like a new Patroclus, rules a sympathetic gold over the languishing humanity. Like the good kings, wine reigns through benevolence and sings its exploits in the throats of its subjects. There are those who on this planet innumerable, unnamed by the masses of people, who, even in this calm of sleep, can find no respite from their sorrow. For them, wine composes songs and poems. Baudelaire, this isn't a good thing. Oh, bless his heart. I'm sure that many readers will undoubtedly deem me too indulgent. Oops. Got called out. 100 years ahead of time. I'm sure that many readers will undoubtedly deem me too indulgent. You justify drunkenness, you idolize debauchery. I must admit that in the face of wine's powerful merits, I do not have the courage to dwell on its faults. Indeed, I have already said that wine and man are strongly allied, and I have conceded that the crimes of each are equal to their virtues. Can I do better? I have, in any event, another idea. If the production of wine were ever to cease, its absence would create a void, a vacuum more terrible than all of the excesses and offenses for which it is blamed. It is not reasonable to believe that people who never drink wine are either idiots or hypocrites. Idiots, that is to say, those who know nothing of humanity and nature, artists who disdain the traditional means of art, workers who curse the machinery, and hypocrites. That is to say, the shameful gluttons, the flag wavers of sobriety. For the record, I don't drink. The flag wavers of sobriety who drink in secret from some carefully concealed bottle. A man who drinks only water and has a secret to keep from his peers. Let us consider further. Some years ago, at an art exhibit, I observed a crowd of imbeciles standing agape before a painting that was highly polished, waxed, and varnished as an industrial object. The work was the absolute antithesis of art. It was, to the drolling's cuisine, what madness is to foolishness, and what a man of fanatic devotion is to a follower. In that microscopic painting could be seen flies in flight. I, too, was drawn towards that monstrous object, but I felt ashamed of this particular weakness, for it was the irresistible attraction to the horrible. At length I realized that I had been unwittingly moved by a philosophic curiosity. I longed to discover the moral character of the man who had dared bring forth such a criminal extravagance. He must be corrupt, I wagered with myself, positively corrupt. My instinct delighted in winning this psychological wager. Having made some inquiries about him, I found that the monster rose regularly before dawn and drank only milk. Soy boy. One or two more stories before we take a stand. One day I noticed a throng of people gathered on the sidewalk. I managed to raise my eyes above the bystanders' shoulders and saw this scene. A man lay upon his back on the ground, stretched full length. His eyes were open, gazing upward at the sky. By his side there stood another man, who spoke to him through gestures. The man on the ground replied with his eyes only, and the two of them were animated by an air of extraordinary goodwill. The standing man's gestures spoke silently to his companion. "Rise up, my friend, and stand by me. Happiness awaits us at the corner, just 2 steps away. The shores of sorrow are not yet out of sight, nor have we reached the high seas of dream. Have courage, my friend, and let us walk on. Bid your legs to do your will." All of this was accompanied by much swaying and harmonious balancing. The other man had obviously already reached the high seas. He was indeed navigating in the gutter, for his blissful smile replied, "Leave your friend in peace. A charitable mist conceals the banks of sorrow, and I have nothing more to ask of the heavens than I be left to dream." And at length his voice was heard in a vaguely whispered phrase, or rather the hint of a sigh that formed the words, "Be reasonable." This scene reaches to the very nuplu ultra. Yeah, it's been too long. It's been years. And there has yet been a hypersublimity in the inebriation, as we shall see. The friend, still indulgent, went on to the tavern alone, only to return moments later holding a rope in his hand. Apparently, he could not resign himself to the idea of looking for happiness on his own, which is why he came to collect his friend in a carriage. The carriage was the strong rope, which he then carefully fastened around his friend's waist. The man on the ground smiled, for he clearly understood this maternal gesture. The other man tied a knot, then set off at a trot like a docile horse, and so they proceeded, like the man who was being carted, or rather dragged, and polished the pavement as he went, all the while beaming with an ineffable smile, until they reached the very door to happiness. The crowd was awed, for that which is too beautiful, that which surpasses man power of poetic expression, is often a source of more astonishment than of compassion. The crowd was awed, for that which was too beautiful. I'm rereading that. There was a Spaniard, a guitarist, who traveled for many years with Paggiani. This was before the epoch of Paggiani's great rise to official glory. The two of them led the vagabond life of bohemians, of wandering musicians, of people without ties to family or homeland. Together, guitar and violin, they gave concerts in every town and village through which they passed. And thus they wandered from country to country. This Spaniard's talent was so vast that he, like Orpheus, could say, "I am the master of nature." Everywhere he went, strumming his strings, making them sing harmoniously beneath his thumb, a crowd always followed. With such a secret, one never goes hungry. They followed him as Jesus Christ followed. Who could refuse dinner and hospitality to this man, a genius, a sorcerer who had touched the depths of your soul with his most beautiful, most secret, most mysterious songs? This man, I am told, could easily obtain simultaneous sound from an instrument capable of yielding only a succession of notes. Paggiani carried their money and managed their budget, which ought to not surprise anybody. The purse traveled on the administrator's person, sometimes up, sometimes down, today in the boots, tomorrow in the jacket lining. When the guitarist, who was fond of drink, asked what cash they had in coffer, Paggiani replied that they were broke, or at least almost broke. For Paggiani in this was like an elderly man, always afraid of being in need. The Spaniard believed him, or pretended to, and his eyes fixed on the distant horizon. He harassed and tormented his inseparable companion. Paggiani and the guitarist walked on opposite sides of the road. In this way they could avoid arguments and study as they walked. When they arrived in a town that seemed to offer some promise of profit, one or two would play a tune of his own composition, while the other, standing alongside him, improvised a melody, a counter-melody, a variation. No one can guess the pleasure and poetry they found in their troubadour existence. They separated, for what reason I do not know. The Spaniard traveled alone. One evening he arrived at a small town in the Jura, where he announced that he would be giving a concert at the town hall. He himself would be the concert, alone with his guitar. My brain is like, make a Wonderwall joke. He made himself known, strumming in all of the taverns of the town. The local musicians were struck by his unique talent, and throngs of people came to see him. Our Spaniard encountered another Spaniard, a countryman, in a section of a town near the cemetery. He was a sort of graveyard contractor or marble cutter who fashioned tombstones. Like most men in the funeral trades, he was a dedicated drinker. So it was in that the bottle and their common homeland carried them a long way together. The musician never left the marble cutter's side. On the very day of the concert, the hour the guitarist was to play, they were still together, but where? The musician had to be found. All of the taverns and cafes were searched. He was finally unearthed with his friend in an unspeakable dive, both of them beastly drunk. There ensued performances to rival those of Frederick and Keene. He at least agreed to play, but then suddenly an idea came to him. "You will accompany me." His friend refused. He owned a violin, but played as badly as the worst street fiddler. "If you won't play, then neither will I." Sermons and good sense failed to make an impression. There was nothing else for it. He had to give in. So there they stood upon the stage before the town's best bourgeoisie. "Fetch me wine," cried the Spaniard. The marble cutter, whom everyone knew, though not as a musician, was too far gone to feel ashamed. The wine brought, the two scoundrels were so impatient to open the bottles that, like the men of low breeding, they cut open the corks with the stabs of their knives. You can imagine the wonderful effect this had on the provincials dressed in all of their finery. The ladies walked out, and much of the audience, scandalized by the spectacle of these two seemingly mad drunkards, exited the hall. But how richly rewarded were those who were allowed curiosity to triumph over propriety, those who were courageous enough to say, "Begin," courageous enough to stay. "Begin," commanded the guitarist. It is impossible to convey the precise nature of the sounds that arose from the drunken violin. Sounds resembling those of a delirious Bacchus, perhaps, cutting stone with a saw. What was he playing, or trying to play? No matter, the first melody had begun. Suddenly, a tune alternately energetic, subtle, and capricious smothered and extinguished the jarring din. The guitar sang ever louder until it overwhelmed the violin, and yet here was the same melody, the same vinous air the marble cutter had begun. The guitar held forth with enormous seniority. It cried, sang, and declaimed with an astounding liveliness and a surety, inexpressible purity of diction. The guitar improvised a variation on the blind violin's theme. The violin was guided by the guitar, which maternally clothed the frail nudity of its sound. Reader, you must understand that such a scene defies description. I heard this story from an eyewitness, a man of scrupulous integrity. In the end, the audience was more drunk than the musician. The Spaniard was cheered, congratulated, and celebrated with enormous enthusiasm, but the character of the townspeople apparently displeased him, for he agreed to never play there again. And where is he now? What sun looks down upon his final dreams? What earth holds his cosmopolitan remains? What ditch harbors his last agony? Where are the enchanting lights of bygone setting suns? And I think I'm gonna go ahead and pause there for now. That was sections 1 and 2 of Charles Baudelaire's On Wine and Hashish from his classic work of Opium and Wine, Artificial Paradises. Thanks so much for tuning in, and thank you for your patience with my Have a great night. Take care. Signing off from your literary philosophy meme, Doomer GF.